Tracy Carrasco from the Fox Business Network. You just saw investors are so worried about the standoff with China, and it's not getting any better. So should you be worried? Let's ask Fox News contributors Gary B. Smith and John Layfield, along with CPA and market analyst Dan Geltrude. Gary B., to you first. What's really going on to drive the market down in the way that stocks fell this week? I was watching the Dow Transports, a real clear indicator of maybe how healthy the economy is. They fell 8% this week, Gary B. It was the biggest drop for a week in over 7 years.
Well, I think, Dagan, we just look at the topic and segments that you've talked about so far today. Tracy mentioned not only the Fed, but you have China. You have, it looks like, in one regard, some of the economic statistics are showing maybe a slowing of the economy. You have so much worry, and then you throw in this heavy volatility. I mean, I've seen volatile days in my 30-odd years in the market, but not so many 800, 600, 700-point swings. It's enough to rattle the longest of long-term investors, and that's what I think is behind this. Just there's so many potential bombshells out there that no one feels secure right now.
Well, yesterday, John, it was they blamed Peter Navarro being on the TV yesterday morning saying that after 90 days, we're going to hike tariffs if we can't get a trade deal together. And when somebody who's not even in a cabinet position is blamed for a market rout like the one we saw yesterday, it's almost like investors are searching for a reason and trying to search for something behind the volatility.
I think you're right. It's great to be on set with you again. You do such a wonderful job. So many years of you and Gary B with Bulls and Bears. It's such a great. Yeah, that's right. I'm just sucking up to you to get more questions thrown to me. But I'm going to continue sucking up. I think you're right. Look, the market's not trading on fundamentals anymore. The jobs report was down a little bit. You had 170,000 jobs per month the last 3 months, which is not bad. It's just the lowest it's been in the past year. So the economy does seem to be slowing. But the biggest thing is these trade issues. It looked like we were going to get some type of truce. Now it looks like we're not only not going to get a truce, but we're going to get a ratchet up of these trade wars in 90 days. And I think that's a real concern to the market.
But what also about, Dan, about the Federal Reserve and what the Federal Reserve is doing? Because that article that Tracy referenced, that the Fed's going to take a wait-and-see approach moving into the new year and isn't on course to hike interest rates maybe every quarter, that's what turned the market around on Thursday. So I've pointed to that and how the Fed is removing massive amounts of money from the financial system as they're trying to reduce their balance sheet. Is that really or is it a combination of Fed and trade?
I think it is a combination, but when you look at what the Fed is doing, if they're going to take their foot off the accelerator when it comes to rates, here's where the danger lies. We have some indications that we could be sliding into a recession. The Fed has very little room to move with the rates being so low. How far can we go down to try to stimulate the economy if we're really going to be on a slide?
Well, by the way, I'll push back on that, though, Dan. People in Washington for years and years and years and years have been saying it should be on the fiscal side. It shouldn't be. You shouldn't have so much pressure being put on the central bank to juice the economy. How about making tax cuts permanent, for example? I'm just throwing that out. But just the rate not being low enough, they could blow the balance sheet up again if they were really worried, and buying securities to push money into the system if the Fed was really worried about the economy.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. However, what I do think is happening here is the market is reacting emotionally, to your point, John. They've moved away from fundamentals. They seem to have a very short attention span, and they're chasing shiny objects. It's a dangerous place for the market to be.
Well, in terms of the Fed removing money, Gary B., from the system, a lot of these securities, even well-known stocks and bonds, have become harder to trade, and that's kind of an indication of money being pulled out of the financial system. I don't want to sound like the nerd that I am deep down, but that's a concern. But I want to ask you this. I'm going to put you on the spot. How much of the market sell-off maybe, or the added worries, is in relation to the Mueller report? And the Mueller report potentially coming out. I remember back before the Ken Starr report was released in 1998. Now, granted, that was when long-term capital management, the hedge fund, also collapsed. But the S&P, between mid-July and when the Starr report came out in September, the S&P 500 fell more than 19% in that period. Now, it did recover even during impeachment proceedings by the end of November. How much of the worry in the market is in relation to what's happening in Washington?
I'm glad you brought that up. That's what I was going to add. You know, amongst the other things that we're worried about, exactly that, this Mueller investigation. We don't know what they will or he will invariably uncover, who will be indicted, who will get off. Does this lead directly back to the president? Can he be put on the stand, indicted, impeached? No one knows. And if we go down that road, oh my gosh, you know, then I would say to people, I'm not sure you wouldn't be in the market right now. I mean, maybe when he's finally, you know, put on the stand and we have a clear, if he is, we have a clear sense of what direction the government's going to go, then you start buying. But you're absolutely right, Dagan. I would say of the things we talked about, the tariffs, the Fed and the Mueller investigation, I would say this is at least, the latter is at least 40% of my concern.
Wow. All right, you got the final word here. Y'all are back next hour. John gets the first question. I promise him that. Gary B., thank you so much, John Layfield, Dan Geltrude. From the shakeup on Wall Street to the shakeup in Washington, what's ahead for Trump's latest replacement picks in the battle over the border wall? Front and center as President Trump prepares to meet with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. Stay with us. Let's bring in Dan Geltrude, Gary B. Smith, and John Layfield. Again, Gary B., can that happen here?
I think what you're seeing is yes, on the roots of it, it's a protest to the gas tax, but I think it's more a protest of the people don't feel the government's doing a good job. You have a country that has 10% chronic, 10% unemployment. And what happens when you get a government that has so much input into the GDP, almost 53% of France's GDP, you get people dependent on what the government does. If you want a preview of what the U.S. could look like years from now as the government grows increasingly in size, look no further than what's happening in Paris.
Again, I read that quote from the Wall Street Journal editorial today, John, that the rich are not rich enough to fund a modern welfare state. France is the most heavily taxed, and it's not just gasoline taxes. It is social insurance, payroll taxes, property taxes, a value-added tax. And here's the story out of what we're seeing there. That it is not just the rich who pay for this. It is everybody pays for this. And every citizen of a country that is a welfare state, that is a socialist state, pays for it. And at some point, there is a breaking point.
At some point there is, yeah. There's such a populist surge in the world today against politicians of all stripes. So there's angst against whatever is the current establishment, whoever that establishment is. You look at what's going on right now in this beautiful city of Paris and burning. You look at what's going on next Tuesday in the UK when they're going to vote on Theresa May's idea for Brexit, which it looks to fail, and it looks like probably a no confidence vote for Theresa May. Apparently there's already the 48 letters that have been signed. They're in an envelope somewhere waiting for the right time to come out. You also look at Italy right now, which refuses to deal with their debt because of the fact of exactly what's going on in France right now. The EU could be in the verge of breaking up if something happens on this Brexit vote and England opts a hard Brexit out. Italy probably goes out as well. The EU breaks up.
But Dan, this is also a leader, Emmanuel Macron, trying to follow an environmental agenda without actually running the numbers on what would be the economic impact. Willing to kneecap is a word the Journal uses, kneecap the economy in order to reduce emissions that are already very low on a per capita basis. Again, this is the kind of reaction that you get when people are fed up, whether they're on the right or the left.
That's true. And when you have, in France's case, a president who's trying to save the world, I think the French people are turning around and say, hey, we got problems here at home. Let's take care of that first. I don't necessarily think that this tax, this gas tax that started this, shall we say, revolution is what it's all about. It's really about the people being frustrated and they just don't like how government is operating. And look, could it happen here? Of course, history repeats itself. Let's not forget, our country was founded based upon a tax revolution. Could it happen again? absolutely can, and we need to make sure we're really careful about how much we're taxing people, because eventually you run out of people to tax.
Gary B., final word to you, but President Trump tried to warn the French leader, saying no responsible leader can put the workers and the people of their country at this debilitating and tremendous disadvantage. He said of the cost of the Paris climate deal when he withdrew. Emmanuel Macron tried to make fun of the president and throw a little shade at him. Didn't work. And now we see Paris on fire. Final word.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is what happens when the people become more and more dependent on the government, even when the government tries to make what they think are smart moves on behalf of everyone else. It gets in the way of private enterprise, and now people are dependent one way or another on what France does, and it's going to hurt.
Gary B., John, Dan, thank you all. Gary B., we'll see you soon.